Yo, what is good, fellas? Hope you boys are all having a fantastic start to your day. Today we're talking about the best, most feared factions to use on your team in Madden 25. Now, if you fellas are new around here, we did make this video when part 1 did go live. But now we got part 2 of most feared, so let's update the best factions to use. I will say before we hop into the video, we did only get 4 brand new most feared faction champions. So those 4 factions that did receive a second most feared champion will obviously be included in the top 4. I will update this video when we get a part 3 though, so don't worry. The final best faction to use video, it's coming, don't worry. We are going to be using mutt.gg for today's video. They have everything broken down perfectly when it comes to the most feared factions. If you guys want to come in here in your own time and figure out which one you want to use, how to build the specific faction to the best possible capabilities, go to mutt.gg. These guys are all absolutely goated. When it comes to the worst one, I do think it is the Gargoyle faction. Few reasons. 1, Demario Davis is a iffy card. 2, the hero associated with the Gargoyle faction. It's Curtis Samuel, an 87 overall, 87 speed, small wide receiver. Not much really interesting happening there. And then 3, the boost are just kind of weird. Sure, some of these are pretty good and some of these do directly affect Demario Davis, like hit power, jump, I guess you could say awareness, strength. But kick power? What? Why do we need kick power on a faction that cannot physically boost up a kicker? I don't understand. It honestly just, there is a kicker in here. It's an 82 overall kicker. So I guess there is a reason for there to be the kick power, but it's not something that's like getting me going. How many of you guys are actually going to use an 82 overall kicker? The rest of the boosts are just kind of like, all right, I guess they're here. You got +1 short route running, but Curtis Samuel isn't really a usable card. And then Demario Davis, like I said, it's a good card, but it's nowhere near a top tier champion that can really boost up the kind of otherwise lackluster faction. Therefore, coming in at number 9. Next up, we got the Reapers. Now, if you guys know me, you know how much I dislike Antoine Winfield. Not as a player, but as his Madden card. It is a 5'9" strong safety. So who wants a 5'9" strong safety? If you don't run a Bucks theme team, no real reason to go out there and pick up this card. 89 speed is nice, but he's short. The boost, they're kind of weird. They do kind of directly affect Antoine Winfield, which I like. You know, you guys can see excel, man coverage, zone coverage, pursuit, break tackle is a good one. But Antoine Winfield is literally the worst most feared champion. So you know, I gotta have his most feared faction down low. Now his 87 overalls are kind of good. I mean, Paris Johnson, right tackle. Luke Musgrave is a little bit interesting, but Paris Johnson is a good card. But Antoine Winfield is literally the worst most feared champion, so you know I had to have his faction down low. Like I said, the boosts are solid, but Antoine Winfield, the worst most feared champion, I do not recommend you guys come out here and build the Reaper Chem. There are just better chemistries to build right now. For 7 though, we got the Super Chemistry. This is Patrick Ricard specific faction. Now, similar to Antoine Winfield, I think the boost here are actually, they're better than Antoine Winfield. I mean, excel, awareness, block shed, kick power once again, power move, zone coverage, run blocking, pursuit, hit power. Really solid boost to actually build around, especially if you guys are only using these 91 overall or 90 overall players that get all of the factions. The issue, Patrick Ricard is a fullback. How many fullbacks do we have in the game that don't need boosts, that are just straight up decent cards that are also free? Patrick Ricard cost way too many coins for me to even consider building his faction. Now, his 87 overall, Emmanuel Forbes, I really like. And, you know, if they do get a solid, or even just like a decent 90 overall champion with most feared part 3, I could see the supers be a super, see what I did there, a super big riser. But right now, Patrick Ricard, it's a fullback. How much do you value the fullback position? And that's what you guys can really make your decision on. Obviously, I'm one guy with a mic and a camera, but if you guys want to go out there and build the super chem, I don't hate it, but at the end of the day, it's a fullback. Do not build your team around a fullback. Or Emmanuel Forbes. Shout out Ron Rivera. Alright, so from this point on in the video, these are all the factions that have the Moshi stamp of approval. At number 6, we got the Giant Chemistry. The 90 overall Giant Chemistry player is Will Shields. I think Will Shields is a good card. Now, it's a right guard. You guys know how I feel about spending this many coins on an offensive lineman. I'm not a fan of it, but I do think the boost directly correlated with this faction, they make sense. Pretty much all of these are hit power, blocking stats. You also do have some short route running stuff in there, some catch in traffic. It's honestly really well-rounded, especially if you guys are picking up Will Shields. Now, the 87 overall hero players, Chidobe Awuzie and Devon Hamilton, not necessarily as like beneficial from the boost, but still, the 90 overall Will Shields player is directly benefiting from these faction boosts, which is not something we can say for pretty much all of the factions so far. It actually looks like EA kind of sat down and realized, all right, maybe we should make something make sense. And you know what? The Giants chemistry does make sense. If you guys are running some of these 91 overall limited times or the 90 overall players that do get all of the faction chems, I don't hate building the Giants chem. The real reason they're coming in at 6, 1, they only have one 90 overall champion, and 2, it's a right guard. You guys know how I feel about picking up offensive linemen this early into the Madden cycle. Come March, though, we can have a different conversation, but right now, Giants Chem, they are coming in at number 6. Coming in at number 5 in the last of the one champion factions, we got the Werewolf chemistry. I mean, what am I talking about right now, fellas? But here we go. The boost on this faction, really solid. I mean, +2 excel, you know I'm not going to complain about that. +1 agility, +1 finesse move, +1 throw under pressure, +1 short accuracy, +1 run, +1 return, +1 run blocking. It's interesting. Antonio Gates, though, does benefit greatly from that +2 excel. The 87 overall hero on this faction is currently Eldon Robertson and JOK, which honestly, 2 really solid cards right there for what they are. All in all, though, solid faction, definitely the best of the only one champions. I guess you could make the argument for the Will Shield Giant chemistry to be a little bit better, but for me personally, I think Antonio Gates is a really solid card, +2 excel, things that I'm not going to complain about whatsoever. So the real part of the video really starts now. These are the factions that do have 290 overall champions. This one is probably the hardest ranking for me. Tom Brady is a card that I don't like, but Cam Chancellor is a card that I really, really like, making the Vampire faction a little bit of an interesting one. Now, when we make these overarching ranking videos, I gotta include everything that's given. So I'm assuming if you guys are building the Vampire faction, you're gonna use Tom Brady and Cam Chancellor. If you guys are building this specific Vampire chemistry faction with just Cam Chancellor and get it to 9-9 without Tom Brady, then it is, I would say, a top 2 faction, but the fact that Tom Brady is in here, he's the worst of the champions we gotta talk about still. They gotta come in at number 4. The boosts are cool. I mean, the boosts do directly affect Tom Brady as well as Cam Chancellor. You guys can see change of direction, something that really matters on your defensive players. Awareness, you guys can see the run blocking that, only helps your quarterback out. You got some good accuracy, some throw power, some tackling stats. The 87 overall in these specific Vampire faction. We got Tony Pollard, kind of gross, and then Logan Wilson, actually a solid outside linebacker. The 87 overall heroes don't really help this faction out too much. Regardless, though, the 4th best faction right now, the Vampire Chem. Number 3 and number 2 were a little bit difficult for me to choose between. I got the Ghost Chem coming in at number 3, though. Reason being, the boosts aren't nearly as good as the number 2 place, but Max Crosby and Deebo Samuel, both really, really good cards. I could very well see somebody building this faction and having an absolute god squad. Both of these are top tier players at their position. Taking a look at the specific boost, you guys can see like juke move, block shed, run blocking, pursuit, awareness, short route running, all really beneficial things to each of these cards. We also do have some decent 87 overall players. Anytime there is a offensive lineman, that is a bonus for me, as well as EJ Speed. It's an outside linebacker. I'm not going to put that in the bonus column, but still a decent outside linebacker regardless. Max Crosby and Deebo Samuel, both really solid champions. Number 2, we got the Warlock chemistry. Now, Nick Chubb by himself is not the greatest champion. Pair him up with Champ Bailey, though, it does get a little bit better. The boost in this specific chem are just so much better than anything else we've taken a look at earlier. +1 awareness, +1 change of direction, +1 juke move, +1 pass block, +1 run, +1 spin, +1 tackle. These do benefit each of these players. Now, like I said, Nick Chubb, not the craziest card. Champ Bailey, really good except for that zone coverage. It was a little bit of a toss-up between them and the Max Crosby faction. I ended up going with the Warlocks because of the boost. Regardless, though, either way, you're fine to go with, but I do think there is a clear-cut number 1 option here. That clear-cut number 1 option is the Ghouls chemistry. I mean, last time we made this video, the Ghouls chemistry was number 1, and now they got the best, I would say the 2 best champions, not the 2 best champions in general, but 2 of the best. I do think Jalen Johnson is the best champion, and then Jamar Chase is a stud of a wide receiver. The boost, also nothing to laugh at. +1 man coverage, +1 excel, +1 zone, +1 tackle, +1 medium route running. This faction, it's legit. And fellas, those are the best factions in Madden 25 Ultimate Team for Most Feared Part 2. As always, let me know down below, who am I sleeping on, who am I glazing on, and I will catch you boys back here later today with updates on every issue, glitch, and thing that EA has just generally screwed up on. But until then, have a great one. Peace, fellas. I'll catch you boys later.